The Series 63 here from K&N will be for the 2019 and newer 5.3 Silverado owners out there who are looking to make the switch to an aftermarket system and want to go with one of the most popular intakes currently available here on the site. Now the Series 63 will combine a black rotomolded plastic tube along with K&N's signature high-flow cotton gauze filter and will not require the use of any aftermarket tune. Price point for the Made in the USA system will hover right around the $400 price point. While the install itself will get a pretty simple 1 out of 3 wrenches on the old difficulty meter and take you no more than an hour or so to complete from start to finish. So K&N is easily one of the most recognizable names in the game when it comes to aftermarket intake systems and filters, and this is really just a solid example of what they do and do very well. Now, typically something like this is installed to help improve airflow, make a little bit more power, and increase the growl coming from your 5.3. Now, we don't have any in-house dyno numbers specifically for this particular kit, but K&N does claim Silverado owners will see upwards of 17 horsepower and 23 pound-feet of torque when the Series 63 has been installed. And what I will say is that's gonna be absolute best case scenario for most truck owners out there without the use of any additional tuning. But outside of that, the K&N will also help deliver a very cool look under the hood, and maybe my favorite part is just that nice deep growl coming from under the hood under acceleration, thanks to that open element or open filter design. Now, speaking of that filter, you are getting one of K&N's signature high-flow cotton gauze oiled filters. This thing is washable, it is reusable over the years, and should be refreshed with K&N's signature oil every time you do your cleaning. Now, the filter itself is going to reside in your metal air box here to help isolate the filter from some of that hot engine bay heat. Now, we already talked briefly about your rotomolded plastic tube here, a feature I really like because that plastic's gonna be a little bit less prone to heat soak. And then finally, you can expect all of the necessary couplers and hardware to get everything bolted into place. The K&N has been made here in the USA and is backed by the company's 10-year, million-mile warranty, just in case you happen to run into any issues over the years. Now, at this time, the Series 63 is not currently CARB certified, but it does have an overwhelming number of 5-star reviews here on the site. As always, guys, feel free to check out some of those reviews on the product page before pulling the trigger, just to hear what fellow 5.3 owners have to say about this system. But now we want to give you a better idea of just how to get things bolted up to your rig at home. So without further ado, check out our detailed walkthrough and tool breakdown right now. Tools needed for this installation include a 3/8 ratchet, 1/4 inch ratchet, long extension, 10mm socket, 8mm socket, T15 Torx tool, pair of cutters, panel removal tool, flathead screwdrivers, 3mm Allen, and a 4mm Allen. Getting started, we need to obviously pop our hood here on our Silverado, and then first step is to unplug your mass airflow sensor. You're gonna wanna pull back on this red clip and then release the plug. So again, slide the red portion back. At that point, you can release the clip. Next up, we're gonna work on removing the intake tube portion of the factory intake. Getting started, we can loosen up our clamp here at the airbox connection. Either use a flathead screwdriver for this or an 8mm socket. Next up, we're going to loosen up the clamp here at the throttle body connection, again using a flathead screwdriver or an 8mm socket. With our two clamps loosened up, we're about ready to pull out the intake tube portion, but before we do, we have to go ahead and remove our PCV hose on the back here, push in on the gray clip, and pull back. At this point now, we can go ahead and remove our intake tube from the engine bay, releasing it from the throttle body, and then from the airbox. Next up, we need to remove the upper radiator valance here. There are 10 plastic clips holding this in place, so grab a trim removal tool, flathead screwdriver, whatever you have laying around. You're gonna wanna pop the top off this clip and then remove the clip itself. Now before we go ahead and remove our upper radiator valance, we do need to remove the hood latch release. To do so, you need a T15 Torx tool. That removed, you can slide it off. With the latch out of the way, now you can remove your valance. The reason you removed your upper radiator valance is to gain access to this clip right here. Basically, you need to pop this guy out. With that clip removed, that'll allow you to pull back the snorkel just enough to get out of that stock airbox. Now we can go ahead and remove this 10mm nut down here, and that will be our first step in removing our stock airbox. Next up, we need to remove this wiring harness and clip from the airbox itself. It's actually attached to a bracket there. To do so, you could either use a small pick tool, flathead screwdriver to release the clip back here and then pull up. At this point, our stock airbox is ready to come out. Couple little tips here. You're gonna wanna push this out of the way, just to kind of secure it underneath one of your hoses. And then also, there are 2 rubber grommets on the back side of the airbox. You don't want to lose those because they will be reused with the K&N airbox. So now that we have the stocker uninstalled here on the table, we figured it'd be a great opportunity to kind of compare the 2 intake systems side by side, and it really couldn't be any more different, right? Stocker is this big clunky airbox, of course, kind of restrictive intake tube, and whatever this is, resonator box. The K&N's sleek, it's all business. You got your high flow oiled filter here, rotomolded plastic intake tube. I like the plastic stuff, it's gonna reduce that heat soak. And then you do have a nicely molded aluminum airbox here that does come with some weather stripping, try to help keep that hot engine bay air from entering the filter itself. Again, K&N claims 17 horsepower, 23 pound-feet of torque without a tune with their system installed. So freeing up that kind of restriction from your stock intake is going to be a benefit. And as an added bonus, you're gonna be picking up some cool noises at the same time. So now that you know some of the subtle differences between the two and some of the not so subtle differences, why don't we show you how to get this installed. Now, before we get to installing our new K&N, we got to do a whole bunch of fun stuff with transferring over mass air sensors and then prepping our new airbox as well. So first step, we're gonna go ahead and remove our factory mass air sensor using a T20 Torx tool and then transfer that over to an adapter plate that K&N provides. All right, with that mass airflow sensor removed, now you can go ahead and grab one of these rubber grommets off of the stock gearbox because it will be used on your new K&N box. With our mass airflow sensor removed, now we can go ahead and work on transferring it over to our new K&N tube. K&N does supply us with a mass airflow sensor adapter plate and gasket. So this is your adapter plate. What you're gonna wanna do is just flip it over here to the back side. You have your gasket. Go ahead and remove your protective adhesive backing. And for this step, what you want to do is, as you can see, you have 2 cutouts here. You want those cutouts to coincide with the 2 holes. That's where your hardware will be. So go ahead and work on lining that up properly. And once you're happy with how it is, go ahead and stick it on. With our gasket applied, now we can go ahead and line up our holes here on our adapter plate. We got the longer of the 2 silver bolts here with the washer. Go ahead and get it in place. loosely tighten it up by hand. With them finger tight, grab your 4mm Allen key and go ahead and snug them up. Now we're finally ready to install our mass airflow sensor. Now, as you can see, this really can go only one way. Try putting it in backward, your holes aren't gonna line up. So get that in there. And then K&N does supply us with some brand new hardware, 3mm Allen heads. And we'll get that started and tightened up. We're just about done here working on the new intake tube, but before we set this aside, we're gonna go ahead and install our new PCV elbow. Pretty simple stuff here, guys, just thread it into place. No Teflon tape or anything needed for this. We can finalize our orientation once we get it in the truck. Now we're ready to move over to our airbox and start prepping that for install. One thing I forgot on our stock airbox to grab was this little rubber grommet here. It's important to just pop this out as we will transfer this over to the K&N. That rubber grommet we just removed from our stock airbox is gonna live right here, so go ahead and pop that into place. We're not going too far to our next step here, guys. We have this little retaining clip that K&N throws in. This is actually gonna secure that wiring harness removed from our stock airbox. So grab the bracket here, grab a bolt along with a lock washer and nut. We'll go ahead and secure this into place as well. Next up, we have our filter adapter, guys. We're gonna go ahead and throw that in so that the larger portion is inside your airbox. And this is gonna be secured with the two included shorter 4mm Allen bolts. Get those guys started by hand, then we'll go ahead and back with our tool and tighten them up. So now we have our filter adapter in and tight. We'll rotate the box 90 degrees to our little leg here. We're gonna use one of our included bolts, stick that through the hole from the inside out. And then we have this little silver cylinder. We're gonna thread that into place. And that little rubber peg we told you about earlier, or grommet, we're gonna go ahead and stick that right on top. Now we're gonna go ahead and throw our filter onto the filter adapter here, guys. Pretty simple stuff. Get it in place. But one thing I do want to point out, make sure that your bolt or your screw is situated where you can access it once the airbox is physically in your engine bay. The last thing you want to do is install your entire intake just to have the bolt unreachable. So when it does come time to clean this thing, you have to remove the entire airbox. Don't do that. Make sure your screw is accessible and somewhere you can access it down the road. Again, flathead or 8mm, whatever you got, and go ahead and tighten this up. Next up, we're gonna prep our airbox with the included weather stripping here, guys. K&N basically tells you to go all around the airbox, so use your discretion. You might need to trim a little bit, but basically just snaps into place. So at this point, as you can see, guys, we have some extra left over here, which is gonna fit perfectly down there. But in order to transfer that down, you're gonna need to make a trim. Let's Grab your cutters or scissors and go ahead and make a snip. And we're just gonna put that little section right down here. This 90 was really hard to make, so this is basically the best way to go ahead and do this. All right, so now we have our airbox prepped, we have our tube prepped, we have one more step to do before we start slapping everything in the engine bay, and that is prep our new PCV line. Because of the orientation now of our intake side PCV port, K&N does include a section of hose to be used along with 2 factory style connectors here. Now we do have to prep this with the included clamps. Tighten that hose clamp up, but we'll repeat the same process on the other side. Now I can go ahead and tighten them down. With our factory PCV hose out of the way, go ahead and install our newly prepped K&N hose on the valve cover side. Snap it into place. We'll just let this dangle for a little bit. Next up, we're gonna get our throttle body coupler in place. We have our clamp in there. Now, K&N does supply a couple different size throttle body couplers. One for the 5.3, one for the 6.2. 5.3 is a little smaller, obviously, so just keep that in mind when test fitting your new coupler. While we're here, we're just gonna go ahead and snug up the throttle body hose clamp. I switched over to the 8mm socket to make my life a whole lot easier. Next up, guys, we have our K&N airbox here ready to go into the engine bay. As you can see, the little rubber grommet that we removed earlier, we wanna make sure that sits back into the factory location, kind of hold the airbox in place, and then we'll get that 10mm nut to secure the airbox. So after you wrestle the airbox into place, guys, you have to go ahead and secure it with this 10mm nut. It's a little tough to see, guys, but believe me, it's down there. You get this nut in place and then go ahead and tighten it up with a 10mm socket. Next up, we can go ahead and secure the wire harness to the bracket that we installed on the K&N airbox. Just kind of slide it into place. Now we can go ahead and reinsert our factory snorkel into the new K&N airbox and secure it with a clip. Now before we get to the new K&N intake tube, I want to go ahead and button up the rest of our upper radiator valance. So go ahead and throw that stock piece back into place, and we can secure it with the clips we removed earlier. With our valance in place, we can reinstall our hood latch release with our T15 Torx tool and wrench. Now we can go ahead and get ready to put our K&N tube in place. To do so, we're going to start with this coupler here at the airbox. Again, we want to make sure we can access our clamp, or more importantly, our screw. I got my 8mm socket back on my wrench, and we're going to tighten this guy up. Now the moment of truth, go ahead and throw on some hose clamps here before we get the intake tube in place. Grab our tube, go ahead and wrestle it into place. After you get the tube situated where you like it, get your clamp closest to the end of the coupler there and tighten it down. Same thing on our air filter side. We're going to go ahead and position our clamp towards the end of the coupler. Make sure we got it where we want it, tighten it down. All right, home stretch here, guys. We're just gonna plug in our mass airflow sensor, get that in place, and don't forget to push that red tab forward. And our final step here, we take our new PCV line, snap it into place. Well, guys, at this point, it's never a bad idea to go back around, check your connections, make sure everything's tight, and once you're done that, you're good to go. Hey, we hope you enjoyed this review and install of K&N Series 63 intake, available for your 2019 and newer Silverado at home. And keep in mind, for more cool products and videos like this, keep it right here at AmericanTrucks.com.